The saying "you never know what goes on behind closed doors" is true, and if walls could talk, they would sometimes have a horrific story to tell. In this video, we'll be taking a look at 5 scary houses where some of the most horrific things in modern times have occurred, some that to this day remain unsolved. Lock your doors, and let's get going. (12205) Imperial Avenue, Cleveland, Ohio. This white duplex house on Imperial Avenue in Cleveland appeared ordinary enough. The man who had lived there since 2005, Anthony Sowell, was a former Marine, and by all accounts he seemed harmless enough. He was often seen sitting on his front steps drinking a beer, sometimes in the company of a woman, and he sometimes invited neighbours over for barbecues, which they gladly accepted. Although he was clearly down on his luck, he caused no problems for his neighbours, who described him as friendly and respectful. The only complaint was he smelt bad, and so did his house. Apart from that, he gave people no reason to wonder what he was doing behind closed doors. Unbeknownst to them, Sowell was on the sex offenders register and had spent 15 years in prison for kidnapping, rape, and attempted rape. After his release in 2005, he moved into the house on Imperial Avenue, which belonged to his deceased father, Thomas, and Thomas's wife, Sagara, who later moved into a nursing home. In October 2009, Latundra Billups was invited by Sowell to his home for drinks. But as the pair got more and more intoxicated, Sowell turned violent and attacked Latundra, sexually assaulting her. After she managed to escape, she reported Sowell to the police. On October 29th, police arrived at 50-year-old Sowell's home with an arrest warrant. He was not there, but was located and arrested 2 days later. When officers searched his house, they encountered a nightmarish scene. The remains of 2 women were buried in a shallow grave in the basement, along with a human skull wrapped in paper and left in a bucket. 4 more corpses were located in crawl spaces throughout his home, and 3 bodies were found buried in the back garden, along with parts of a 4th. In total, the remains of 11 women were found. Forensic tests revealed most of them had been strangled, and some were discovered still gagged and bound. All had been sexually assaulted in the most depraved way. It later emerged Sowell had also raped another 3 women who he'd let live. All except one were mothers, whose ages ranged between 53 and 25. All had a history of drug abuse, which police believed Sowell used to lure victims to his home. He was charged with 11 counts of aggravated murder and 74 counts of rape, kidnapping, tampering with evidence, and abuse of a corpse. He became known as the Cleveland Strangler. On July 22, 2011, Sowell was convicted on all but 2 counts, and on August 12th was sentenced to death and placed on death row at Chillicothe Correctional Institution in Ohio. After his conviction, his former residence on 12205 Imperial Avenue was demolished by order of the city's leaders, and later a memorial garden to the 11 victims was created. Sowell died on February 8, 2021, after suffering from an unspecified terminal illness. (875) South Bundy Drive, Brentwood, California. In January 1994, Nicole Brown Simpson moved into this 3-story rental townhome on Bundy Drive in Brentwood, California. In the years prior to the move, Nicole had been embroiled in an acrimonious divorce from former professional American football player turned actor O.J. Simpson. Their marriage had been volatile, and police had been called several times over domestic violence. Even after their divorce in 1992, Simpson and Brown tried to reconcile, and there were claims of stalking on both sides. However, it seems things had calmed down for a bit for Nicole by the time she moved into Bundy Drive. In April of that year, she met 25-year-old restaurant waiter Ron Goldman, and they started a platonic relationship, occasionally meeting for coffee and dinner. But Simpson was still in close contact with Nicole, and when she fell ill with pneumonia, it was him who came to care for her. On June 12th, Nicole spoke to her close friend Chris Jenner, and they arranged to meet the following day for lunch. That evening, she dined with her mother at the restaurant where Ron Goldman worked. After they left, Nicole called the restaurant to tell them that her mother had dropped her glasses, and could they look for them. The glasses were found, and Goldman offered to drop them back at Nicole's house, a decision that proved to be fatal. In the early hours of June 13th, the bodies of Brown and Goldman were found in a pool of blood, stabbed to death outside of Nicole's home. An autopsy determined that Nicole had been stabbed 7 times in the neck and head and had sustained a 5.5-inch gash across her throat, which had severed both her left and right carotid arteries and breached her right and left jugular veins. The wound on her neck nearly decapitated her. She also had defensive wounds on her hands. Ron had been stabbed multiple times in the neck, chest and abdomen, and had defensive wounds on his hands. It is not believed Ron was the target, but was killed to silence him. O.J. Simpson was an immediate person of interest in their murders, and in an agreement with his attorneys, he was scheduled to turn himself in on the morning of June 17th. However, he failed to turn up, and later became the subject of a bizarre low-speed police pursuit in a vehicle owned and being driven by his former teammate and longtime friend, Al Cowlings. According to Cowlings, Simpson was in the back of the vehicle holding a pistol to his head, threatening to shoot himself if he was not taken back to Brentwood estate. Simpson was later arrested and charged with the murders of Nicole and Goldman. He was later tried for the murders in a controversial and highly publicized criminal trial that lasted nearly 9 months, that resulted in Simpson being unexpectedly acquitted. However, a civil trial brought by Ron Goldman's father found Simpson liable for the wrongful deaths, and he was awarded $33.5 million in damages. In 2007, Simpson was arrested in Las Vegas, Nevada, and charged with armed robbery and kidnapping. He was convicted and sentenced to 33 years imprisonment with a minimum of 9 years without parole, and was released in 2017. He died of cancer in February 2024. As for the house, while it sat empty for 2 years after the deaths, but in 1997, the new owners completely re-landscaped the shrubbery where Brown and Goldman's bodies were found, making the murder site virtually unrecognizable. They also officially changed its address. However, that doesn't stop tourists from dropping by from time to time. (810) North Linden Drive, Beverly Hills, California. This 7-bedroom, 7-bathroom Beverly Hills mansion recently sold for $17 million, but its new owners had to look past the brutal murder that occurred there. In the 1940s, infamous American gangster Bugsy Siegel leased the residence for his girlfriend Virginia Hill. But by 1947, the lease was due to expire, and Virginia had moved out because her relationship with Siegel had become increasingly volatile. On June 20th, Siegel flew in from Las Vegas to remove the last of his clothes and personal belongings from the home. That evening, he was sitting in the living room reading a copy of the Los Angeles Times. His associate, Alan Smiley, was also present. Without any warning, an unknown assailant fired through the window with a .30 caliber military M1 carbine, hitting Siegel 4 times, twice in the head and twice in the face. Alan Smiley was slightly injured after a bullet ripped through his jacket, grazing his left arm. On December 26, 1946, just 6 months before Siegel was shot to death, he opened the Flamingo Hotel, located south of Las Vegas, along the highway to Los Angeles. Today, this highway, which is now filled with mega resorts, is known as the Las Vegas Strip. Today the house still sparks curiosity, with people regularly driving up to take photographs. The living room where Siegel was shot has been refurbished, but is basically the same as it was on that fateful night. The fascination with gangsters, and in particular Siegel, was the inspiration behind the 1991 movie Bugsy, in which Warren Beatty played Siegel. The gunman has never been identified, but there are plenty of theories about why he was shot. Some believe leaders of the East Coast crime syndicate who financially backed the Flamingo project were upset about cost overruns. Others suggest he was killed by Virginia Hill's brother after learning of how he brutally mistreated her. However, the truth is, he had many enemies. He was a gangster and former hitman who had a furious temper if you crossed him. And although he was pivotal in building modern-day Las Vegas, it was financed by gambling and extortion. The case is still open, but the chances of finding who was responsible for his death is slim. However, the Beverly Hills Police Department considers the high-profile killing to be an open case and will not release the Siegel file. Holmfield Court Flats in Thornton Road, Bradford, United Kingdom. In 2010, a caretaker of the Holmfield Court Flats in Bradford settled into their chair to review CCTV, There had been a spat of vandalism and petty crime in the area, and he hoped to catch who was responsible on camera. However, what he saw was far worse than he could have ever imagined. In the corridor, he saw a man chasing a woman before catching her and knocking her unconscious. He then left the woman on the floor before returning with a crossbow, which he used to fire a bolt into the woman's head. He then dragged her body out of view. The same man was then captured going backwards and forwards with bin bags and a backpack. The shocked caretaker called the West Yorkshire Police. At this point, they were aware of at least 3 sex workers that had gone missing in the past year, and feared that they were dealing with another serial killer in the Bradford area. The first being Peter Sutcliffe, the Yorkshire Ripper. The man was quickly identified as a resident of Holmfield Flats named Stephen Griffiths, and he was promptly arrested. However, at first, investigators could find no physical evidence to link him to any crimes. That was until they received a call from a member of the public who had discovered female body parts in the River Aire at Shipley. A human head was also found in a backpack. The remains were later identified as missing sex worker Suzanne Blamis, aged 36, and the discovery was quickly linked to the disappearance of 2 other sex workers, Shelley Armitage and Susan Rushworth. Police searched Stephen's 1-bedroom flat at Holmfield Court and looked into the background of the suspect. They discovered he was a 40-year-old criminology PhD student at Bradford University who had a special interest in Jack the Ripper. He was a loner who struggled with his mental health and had spent time in a psychiatric hospital. He also had a strange website using the pseudonym Venpira, on which he wrote, "I am a pseudo-human at best, a demon at worst. What will this pseudo-human do, one wonders?" Inside his flat, detectives found 2 large monitor lizards that he kept as pets, as well as rats in a trunk that he used to feed them. His neighbours described how he let the lizards walk up and down the corridors, and that they heard a lot of noise coming from his flat at all hours of the night and day, and that he nearly always wore a long black leather coat and had lived at the flat for the past 13 years. When he appeared in court in May 2010, charged with 3 murders, he gave his name as the Crossbow Cannibal. He claimed he ate parts of Susan's flesh, adding, "That's part of the magic." On the 21st of December 2010, he was convicted of all 3 murders after pleading guilty and was handed a whole life order, meaning he will never be released. It's believed he killed more than 3 people after he confessed to 5, but later refused to cooperate anymore with police. Holmfield Court is still standing and occupied by tenants, although it's unclear if Stephen's flat has been re-rented since the horror that occurred there. "8763 Wonderland Avenue in Los Angeles, Laurel Canyon." 8763 Wonderland Avenue is a white-painted split-level house with 2 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms. From the outside it looks like any other suburban house in Los Angeles. However, this is the location of one of the most infamous and brutal unsolved homicides in recent years, where 4 bodies were found on July 1st, 1981 that were so badly beaten they were unrecognizable. The grisly story began in the late 1970s when the house was leased to Joy Miller. It later became the base for one of LA's most successful cocaine and heroin distributors when Joy started a relationship with gang member Billy DeVerrell. The gang leader, Ron Launius, and his wife Susan also lived in the house. Another associate of the gang was John Holmes, the then famous adult film actor, as well as David Linden and Scott Thornton, the former lover of Liberus. The gang had a reputation for stealing from their rivals, and on June 29, 1981, 4 members of the gang robbed the home of notorious club owner and gang leader Eddie Nash. During the robbery, Nash's bodyguard was shot and wounded by David Lind, and the gang got away with at least $1 million in illegal drugs, cash, jewelry and arms. Shortly after the robbery at 4 p.m. on July 1st, the police were called to 8763 Wonderland Avenue, after furniture movers next door heard desperate moaning coming from inside the house. When police entered the home, they were met with a grisly scene. The body of Barbara Richardson, David Lynn's girlfriend, was lying in a pool of blood on the floor near the couch she had been sleeping on. Joy Miller was found dead in her bed, while DeVerrell's body was slumped leaning against a TV stand. A bloody hammer was tangled in Joy's sheets, and several metal pipes littered the floor. In the neighbouring bedroom, Wonderland gang leader Ron Launius was dead, bloodied and beaten almost beyond recognition. But perhaps the most disturbing sight was the discovery of Susan Lanius. She was found covered in blood on the floor, next to the bed that held her dead husband's body. Her skull was bashed in, but miraculously she was still alive. The moans that the moving company had heard had been from her. Susan survived the attack, but the brain damage she sustained left her with permanent amnesia, unable to recall the events of the Wonderland murders. It's believed she had been led on the floor for at least 12 hours before police arrived. A police search of the home uncovered a bloody handprint belonging to James Holmes, who was arrested and charged with 4 counts of murder. However, Holmes was later acquitted of the crime, with the jury believing he had been set up by Eddie Nash. Attention then turned to Nash, but he too was saved by a hung jury, and he walked free. He was eventually jailed in 2000 when he was charged with drug trafficking and money laundering. In a twist, Nash later admitted he bribed one of the jurors in his Wonderland murder trial, although he never admitted to having ordered the murders. Today the Wonderland murders are remembered as one of Hollywood's most gruesome crimes, and the house where they occurred is now occupied by a married couple who are plagued by dark tourists wanting to take photographs of the house that holds the unsolved murders of 4 people. I certainly wouldn't be renting that place anytime soon. What about you? So that's it for this video. Which one of these homes did you find the creepiest? Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.